to her family. My grandfather, at the age of 15, with his father, brother, and friends, is forced to march in the desert of Deir Zor, where they are met with a spray of bullets from Turkish soldiers. The Armenian genocide is called the first genocide of the 20th century, although it's a little bit misleading, because the Herero and Namakwa genocide in Southwest Africa, which is currently Namibia, was the very first genocide in 1904, and the Armenian genocide was after that. Raphael Lemkin in 1944 coined a word genocide, and he defined it as a premeditated, systematic campaign to exterminate an entire people. The word genocide consists of the Greek prefix genos, meaning race or tribe, and the Latin suffix "cide," meaning kill, hence the intent on killing a race. Genocide was recognized first as a crime under international law in 1946 by United Nations and codified as an independent crime in 1948 during the Genocide Convention. The convention has been ratified by 149 states. This is as of 2018. And the article of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide states, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measurements intended to prevent birth from within the group, last and not least, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. For a crime of genocide, there are two main elements. One is mental, and the second one is physical. Physical one that we just read, but the mental, that is where it stays in people's memories for years and years. The Armenian genocide was the systematic killing and deportation of the Armenians by the Turks of the Ottoman Empire. In 1915, during World War I, leaders of the Turkish government set in motion a plan to expel and massacre Armenians. Deportations finally ended. When the deportations were finally ended, there was 1.5 million Armenians that were killed and many more forcibly removed from the country. The Armenian people have made their home in the Caucasus region of Eurasia for some 5,000 years. For some of that time, the Kingdom of Armenia was an independent entity. At the beginning of the 4th century, for instance, it became the first nation in the world to make Christianity its official religion. But for the most part, control of the region shifted from one empire to another. During the 15th century, Armenia was absorbed into the Ottoman Empire. In spite of all these atrocities and these difficulties, the Armenian community thrived under Ottoman rule. They tended to have better educated and wealthier than their neighbors, who in turn grew to resent their success. This resentment was compounded by suspicions that the Christian Armenians would be more loyal to the Christian governments, such as the Russian governments, than the Turkish government. The Turkish Sultan Abdulhamid II, obsessed with loyalty over all, and infuriated by the growing Armenian campaign to win basic civil rights, declared that he would solve the Armenian question once and for all. And he has made this comment: "I will soon settle those Armenians," he told a reporter in 1890. "I will give them a box on the ear which will make them relinquish their revolutionary ambitions." Between 1894 and 1896, this box of ear took the form of state sanctions program. In response to large-scale protests by Armenians, Turkish military officials, soldiers, and ordinary men sacked Armenian villages and incited the massacre of their citizens. Hundreds of thousands of Armenians were murdered. In 1908, a new government came to power in Turkey, a group of reformers who called themselves the Young Turks. They overthrew the Sultan Abdulhamid and established a more modern constitutional government. At first, the Armenians were hopeful that they would have an equal place in this new state, but they soon learned that what the nationalistic Young Turks wanted, most of all, was to Turkify the empire according to this way of thinking. Non-Turks were a grave threat to the new state. On April 24, 1915, the Armenian genocide began. That day, the Turkish government arrested and executed several hundred Armenian intellectuals. There are many pictures that show these intellectuals being hung, crucified, killed. These are all evidence in books and archives. The marchers were stripped naked and forced to walk under the scorching sun until they dropped dead. People who stopped to rest, they were shot. At the same time, the Young Turks created a special organization, which in turn organized killing squads or butcher battalions to carry out, as one officer put it, the liquidation of the Christian elements. These killing squads were often made up of murderers and other ex-convicts. They drowned people in rivers, threw them off cliffs, crucified them, and burned them alive. In short order, the Turkish countryside was littered with Armenian corpses. After the Ottomans surrendered in 1918, the leaders of the Young Turks fled to Germany. Why Germany? Because Germany had promised them not to prosecute them for the genocide. However, a group of Armenian nationalists devised a plan known as Operation Nemesis to track down and assassinate the leaders of the genocide. Ever since then, the Turkish government has denied that the genocide took place. The Armenians were an enemy force, they argue, and their slaughter was a necessary war measure. Turkey is an important ally of Canada, United States, and other Western nations. And so their governments have been slow to condemn the long ago killings. On April 23rd, in Canada, 1996, the House of Commons passed a resolution stating that this House recognized, on the occasion of the 81st anniversary of the Armenian tragedy, which claimed more than 1.5 million lives, that took place on April 24, 1915. On April 21st, 2004, finally, the House of Commons of the Canadian Parliament adopted a motion recognizing the Armenian genocide. Since the Senate had already passed a resolution recognizing the Armenian genocide in June 13, 2020, the adoption of the bill, M380, finalizes the complete acknowledgement by Canada's legislature of the fact of the Armenian genocide. And on April 19, 2006, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada at the time, issued a statement after a motion was passed that stated, House of Commons acknowledges the Armenian genocide of 1915 and condemns this act as crime against humanity. An interesting statement followed that. And the statement said, we must never forget the lessons of history, nor should we allow the enmities of history to divide us. The freedom, democracy, and human rights enjoyed by all Canadians are rooted in our mutual respect for one another. In March of 2010, a U.S. congressional panel voted to recognize the genocide. In October 2019, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a resolution that recognized the Armenian genocide. And this past April, President Biden issued a statement saying the American people honor all those Armenians who perished in the genocide that began 106 years ago. The reason I tell you all of this is because so you see and you understand how long it took before the genocide was recognized. Today, 33 countries formally recognize the Armenian genocide, including United States, Germany, France, Italy, of course Canada, Russia, Brazil, and the European Union. Turkey denies the genocide and spends multi-million dollars annually on public relations and advertising firms to minimize and soften the effects. The Armenian genocide was used as the blueprint for the Holocaust and other genocides that followed. Hitler, in his August 22nd, 1939 document that he sent to Lochner in Berlin, said, "I have issued the command, and I will have anybody who utters but one word of criticism executed by a firing squad." That our war aim does not consist in reaching certain lines, but in the physical destruction of the enemy. Accordingly, I have placed my death head formations in readiness for the present only in the east, with orders to them to send to death mercilessly and without compassion men, women, and children of Polish derivations and language. Only thus shall we gain the living space which we need. And he turned around and he said, "After all, who speaks today of the Armenian annihilation? How can you finish a speech about the blueprint of many genocides, Holocaust, massacres that followed? Regardless of how you tell the story, there is doom, gloom, death, pain, suffering of people, innocent people, children, youth, women, men, and elders. Today, I stand with you commemorating all genocides, Holocaust, massacres, atrocities against mankind, remembering the past, and I encourage you to continue honoring your forefathers by building a brightful future for all Canadians."
Thank you, Mr. Matisoan, for that informative and touching speech on the Armenian genocide and the struggles of the Armenian people who deserve justice. And we thank you for your efforts in being a strong advocate for human rights and applaud you for your hard work and initiatives. Our next speaker this evening is Member of Provincial Parliament for the riding of Don Valley North since June 2018, Mr. Vincent Key. He is the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries and member on the Standing Committee on Regulations and Private Bills. I now welcome the Honourable Member of Provincial Parliament, Mr. Vincent Key, to speak.
It doesn't work now. Yeah, I will shout out. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so it's thank you for your introduction. So my name is Vincent Kerr. I'm the member of Provincial Parliament from Don Valley North. So to begin, I want to thank you, my best friend, Alice Babican, for inviting me to join you all the recognition of the World Genocide Commemoration Day. As declared by the United Nations, my gratitude extends to him for his remarked efforts to bring attention to the horrors and the genocides and for his advocacy of victims and survivors. I remember in his past bill in the genocide education, I spoke for the second reading. I'm humbled and honored to take part in this event to share my thoughts and to pay tribute to the victims from all genocides throughout the source of history. This horrific tragedies leave behind a trail of tears and human remains. On December 13th, 1937, an unforgivable and indefensible catastrophe occurred which is known as Nanjing Massacre. In Chinese, they call Nanjing 大屠杀. Japanese troops captured Nanjing, the China's capital, and started 6-week-long bloody slaughters in the city. During that winter, about 300,000 vulnerable children, civilians, and unnamed Chinese soldiers were brutally murdered, and over 20,000 women were raped and tortured. While these extraordinary shocking numbers cause us to cry out collectively in disbelief and sorrow, we must remember too that the victims are so much more than numbers on the genocide record. They each had names, they had lives to live, families to love, to go dreams, place to go, dreams to discover, and they have valued. Together, we have the opportunity to honor the victims whose futures were senselessly stolen by genocide. As we honor them today, with heads bound and hearts heavy, let's also remember their sacrifice and that of their families and their descendants who remained traumatized by the legacy of the vicious and cold-hearted extinction of lives en masse. Whenever we allow human beings to be treated as less than human, outsiders, or scapegoats, we risk contributing to conditions that makes genocide possible. That is why it is crucial for the future of humanity that we never turn away or remain silent in the face of suffering we see ruthlessly imposed upon others by people who are intoxicated by power and control. At any cost, there is never a justification for mass murder. We must work hard to ensure that we create and protect an environment in Canada where we all feel we have a place to belong. We need to respect the fact that someone we identify as different from us does not mean they are any less human. Despite all of our differences, we each deserve to be treated as equals whose lives have meaning and value. Therefore, as an MPP in Ontario, I have the responsibility to ensure that our differences are respected and our diversity is celebrated. Home to a variety of diverse and multiculturalism communities, Ontario cultivates a climate of inclusion, which is essential to creating a society where the seeds of genocide will not take root. That is why we must remain vigilant to protect against any threat to our peaceful existence. Let's always remember, when united, we stand strong. When divided, we falter and fall. So as my friend has mentioned in the beginning, I'm so happy to share with you that my private member's bill, Bill 34, an act to proclaim May as Anti-Asian Racism Education Month, has passed third reading today morning. Thank you. And thank you, my good friends. Thank you for your confidence and support. He speak to support this bill, this bill in this morning. Thank you, Aris. Thank you. This bill promised to raise awareness about the shameful presence of anti-Asian racism in our midst. Too many Canadians of Asian heritage have been the targets of racism slurs and physical assault that have escalated since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. I am determined to ensure that the disturbing rise in anti-Asian racism will not grow into a dangerous trend. Through awareness and education campaigns, I and many my supporters will strive to enlighten Canadians from all backgrounds about their Asian Canadian neighbors. While I emphasize their value placed in our shared history and future, as we recognize their worth contributions to our Canadian way of life. On this World Genocide Commemoration Day, please join me in my quest to envision and create the more human world for our children and theirs to inherit. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MPP Mr. Vincent Key, for your continued effort in being a human rights champion and bringing the righteous fight to Queen's Park and seeking justice for the victims of genocide. We congratulate you on your passing of your private member's bill and your continued efforts in seeking justice for those victims. Up next, we have a dance tribute to the Tamil Eelam's great heroes, the Maaveeras, who sacrificed their lives to prevent the genocide perpetuated on the peoples of Tamil Eelam. The dance will be presented by Ms. Sudarshini Thilipan, students of Samskriti School of Arts. We now welcome the dancers to the stage.
எழுந்தோம் அதிரும் திசையை எதிரும் புதிரும் வெளியனல் அறிந்தோம் சமரிடம் மொழி அறிந்தோம் அதிரும் திசையில் எதிரும் புதிரும் விழிய நிலறினோம் சமகிடும் மொழி அறிந்தோம் Without music, even without music. Good job. Yeah, just move it here.
Thank you to the wonderful dancers from the Samaskriti School of Arts. Up next, we have from the Canadian Hellenic Congress, Mr. George Manios, who will be giving his speech. We welcome George. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the kind invitation, Ari, and your partners to attend this historic and important event as we remember the decision of the United Nations to declare December 9th in memory of those people who perish under various tyrants within our history. My name is George Manios, and I'm the chair of the Hellenic Genocide Committee of the Canadian Hellenic Congress. And our role is to advance, advocate, promote awareness, not just of the Hellenic genocide, otherwise known as the Greek-Podian genocide, to the public and to all levels of government, but to ensure that these things never occur again. Briefly, I'd like to put in some context as to the Hellenic genocide that has taken place in the Ottoman Empire and present-day Turkey. It took place at the same time as the Armenian genocide. What my friend from the Armenian National Committee described can be said the same about the Greeks that suffered during the same period. Literally, women were raped, men were killed. There were forced marches. In fact, the Ottoman Empire took about 250,000 conscripts, mainly Greeks, and forced them to march in deserts to the point that could not move and they'd be killed. It was horrific for those people. Records show that 900,000 Greeks that resided in Asia Minor, present-day Turkey, since the Homeric times, 800 BC, were systematically exterminated by the Ottoman and Young Turk leadership. We must not forget those lives that perish. We must educate our children and the children after our children so that these things cannot be repeated again in the 21st century. However, notwithstanding the nice speeches made by the United Nations, the government of Canada, and all other countries that recognize the Greek-Podian genocide and the Armenian genocide, none of those democracies ever had the guts to impose punitive measures on those tyrants. Those tyrants continue, not in the form that they were originally, but in a different form. And as long as it's tremendous unwillingness on the part of the democracies, quote unquote, to impose punitive measures on those individuals, those people will continue to commit those genocides. The people have to become aware that if we don't take things into our hands, it will not be achieved. I remember watching the Rwanda genocide on TV at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the blood was flowing in the rivers. Yet nobody said anything. Everybody turned a blind eye. Government of Canada turned a blind eye. The Belgians turned a blind eye. We haven't learned the lessons from history. We are repeating history. One other point I'd like to make on this occasion. What occurred in the Ottoman Empire, it wasn't just the Ottoman Empire that had specific interest to exterminate the Christians there. There were the geopolitical interests of Germany and Great Britain, the so-called democracies at the time, or they think they were democracies. The Germans went a bit further. They were the mentors of the Young Turks how to exterminate people, and exterminate not only the Greeks and the Armenians, but they took those lessons of the extermination and they applied it to our fellow Jewish community members in Germany during the Second World War. We haven't learned anything. We allow those tyrants to remain. I think we need to be collectively united and take it a step further. Demand of our governments to impose punitive measures, to impose an excise tax on their imports to Canada, and use that money for genocide awareness and education. If we do not do that, we're just repeating messages, don't mean anything. Another generation will just repeat the other message. Finally, our struggle is not just to recognize the genocide by the governments, but we want the governments, upon recognition of those genocides, to begin a process of educating our children in the various schools. We as Canadians have failed, and we should begin to re-examine and rethink this process. My friend Ari Babigan introduced Bill 97. He received second reading. I won't go to the history why it didn't go through. But was there any commitment on the part of the government, once passed that legislation, to begin the process of engaging the community, educating the people, and making it a core curriculum in the educational system? I doubt it. They'll always find reasons for it. So the struggle will continue. Yes, we must remember those who perished. Yes, we must promote that genocide is civil. And yes, we have to hold accountable those individuals who are committed the genocide and are committing genocide today. And we have to separate the two. We cannot be friends with a tyrant and turn a blind eye what this tyrant did. Remind me of Uganda. Yet, we always find a way to say, well, occur, we bring them to Canada. Yes, it's positive. But we never really punish the tyrants. And we need to get justice. And until we do that justice, we will not be able to achieve peace for the lives that those people that were exterminated. Thank you for the invitation, Ari and friends. And Ari, next time I'll bring my technical division with me. Thank you.
Going on, right?
Thank you, Mr. George Banos, for reminding us of the suffering of the Greek community during the Greek genocide, which included the Pontic genocide, which was the systematic killing of the Christian Ottoman Greek population, which was carried out during World War I, and its aftermath on the basis of their religion and ethnicity. We applaud Mr. Manos for his continued advocacy and justice for genocide, as well as his human rights initiatives. Up next, we have the Honorable Prime Minister for the Transnational Government of Tamil. The Transnational Government of Tamil is a democratically elected government of over 1 million strong Tamils from the island of Elam, living in several countries around the world. The Transnational Government of Tamil was formed after the 2009 Mullawaikal genocide of the Elam Tamils by the Sri Lankan government and its forces. The Transnational Government of Tamil thrice held internationally supervised elections among Tamils around the world to elect 135 members of parliament for its legislative assembly. It has 2 chambers of parliament, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and also a cabinet. The Transnational Government of Tamil is leading a campaign to realize the political aspirations of Tamils through peaceful, democratic, and diplomatic means, and its constitution mandates that it should realize its political objectives only through peaceful means. It's based on the principles of nationhood, homeland, and self-determination. The Transnational Government of Tamil seeks that the international community hold the perpetrators of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide against the Tamil people to account. The Transnational Government of Tamil calls for a referendum to decide the political future of Tamils. The Prime Minister of the Transnational Government of Tamil is the elected Mr. Vishwanathan Ruthrakumaran, a New York-based lawyer. Joining us now via Zoom to deliver his speech from New York is our Right Honorable Vishwanathan Ruthrakumaran, Prime Minister of the Transnational Government of Tamil.
He's having some difficulty logging, so call the next speaker to deal with it. Call the next speaker. எனக்கு பிஎம் அப்படி மட்டும் இதில் காட்டுறாங்க இதுவும் பெருசாக அவர் ட்ரை பண்ண ட்ரை
As the Prime Minister, Mr. Ruthrakumaran, is having difficulty joining us via Zoom right now, we will move on to the next speaker. From the Alpha Representative Group, we have Dr. Joseph Wong, who will be giving a speech. You're welcome, Doctor.
Let me hold it. Ladies and... Is it on? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here to join you in a solemn commemoration of the victims of genocides and massacres in the history of mankind. The chairman of the Hellenic Congress said it right. More often than not, the geopolitical interests override the humanitarian and morality values in the history. We have seen history repeated times and again, and it appears that we have never learned. Knowledge is the foundation of peace. And to go to this route, we need education. And then that's why many of you have reiterated tonight that we need to do better education in this province and in this country, actually around the world. Alpha Education was formed in 1997. Our objective is exactly to carry out humanity education using World War II in Asia history as a background to make sure that we educate our children and our future generations about the horrors of war, about the horrors of the crimes against humanity, and how we could achieve peace, although it seemed to be a remote probability that we could achieve it. But that doesn't mean that we would not try. MPP Key was right to point out that all these figures should not be just figures. They are parents, their children, husbands and wives, and everybody should be entitled to their own future. Nobody should be slaughtered like an animal in their own countries. So that is why I'm joining you tonight here to tell you something about what Alpha Education has been doing. Canadian history, although we are very inclusive, we should be a very inclusive society, but so far, Canadian history and Canadians have been kind of ignoring what happened in Asia. Our history is really one of a European center history. That is why in 2008, we lobby the Ministry of Education of the provincial government. No, it doesn't. I don't need that. Okay, all right. We lobby the Ministry of Education of the provincial government to adopt the history of World War II in Asia into the curriculum, and we succeeded. And since then, we have been working with the ministry, with the school boards, with schools and educators on educating Canadian children about the other side of the world. We could not only depend on our knowledge of the West. It is important. But how about Asia? As Asia is rising in importance in cultural, economic, and political arenas, our children should not be deprived of the knowledge of that part of the world, which is a big part of the human family. And Alpha Education is now building the world's first museum dedicated to the education of World War II in Asia. The objective is very simple. We are not simply teaching history. Yes, it is very important. We should not forget about it. But on the other hand, we also need to look forward. We want to educate our children the values of humanity, and the museum would be open in 1 year's time. I want to acknowledge my executive director, Flora Chong, who is responsible to build this museum from the very beginning. Hopefully next year we would have the museum established. And we are working with schools, with all of the people here and the communities to promote the humanity education so that we as citizens of any country should supervise our government, should direct our government not to commit any mistakes in the future. I think that is an important message, and I want to congratulate all of you who have been working on this area for so long, and I want to thank Aris and many of you in the political arena to make sure our provincial government, our federal government recognize the horrors of the war and make sure that we would not commit any crime like this in the future. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph Wang, for your inspirational speech and your continued human rights efforts. We also welcome Dr. T. Wang from CPAC as well to give some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Harris, inviting me here. Friends and ladies and gentlemen. Well, I came from CPAC. CPAC stands for Chinese professionals that immigrate to Canada. We started with the kind of thinking that why we see so many things such as bad as genocide happen. Also, we ask questions: what are the roots of this? People say, oh, because these people are not well educated, so they are rude. Actually, I doubt that approach. Think about that in the 1937, when Japanese soldiers killed Chinese in Nanjing. At that time, Japan was the best developed country in Asia. They have the best education level. When the Germans killed Jews, do you think that Germans are less educated than Jews? No. The problem is not education. Rather, it's what do you educate? So we say that we should find the root of the genocide. When we saw genocide happening, it's too late. You cannot stop that without without a military interact. Normally, it's very late. But the trouble is that how can we stop that? Well, we think that Canada is safe, isn't it? Canada is equal. Canada is nice. Canada is a dream of many immigrants. But look at that. Since pandemic come to this country, Asian and all Asian look-alike people not be discriminated because you've been criticized as you bring this virus here. So when you see that the crime rate in Canada, this hate crime rate against Asian increased by 700%. You're surprised to see that why Canada, such a beautiful country, can behave like that. When that Armenia people, when that Greek people, you live in your beautiful country, when these things happen to your country, you suddenly feel that you're helpless. You need people to understand your situation. Then you say, where is the solution? How do we stop that? Right? So CPAC now decided we will push for that is that the education from the root, which means we need to make sure that we respect everybody, every culture. We understand that we are all equal. So that's why EDI in Canada is so important. And we need to start from that. Not just saying, hey, when that genocide happened, you don't kill people. That's too late. It's too shallow. We should say, you should respect every life in our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. T. Wang, for your genocide advocacy work that you do with CPAC. Now, to appreciate the wonderful performance of the Samskriti School of Art students, we welcome the students up to the stage to receive a recognition from the Honorable Member of Provincial Parliament, Mr. R.S. Barbican, to hand out certificates to the students, as well as Minister Roy Vignaraja of the Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam to also hand out certificates. We call upon Sakshadi Dilipan to receive her certificate.
This is a small token of appreciation from me to these young people, the future generation who will carry the torch on these important issues. And this is just a reminder when they grow up that they have taken part from their youths, from when they were young, so that they can carry the torch for the future. So thank you very much for all of you for your participation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have
Sudarshini.
Sudarshini Kaliban.
Sudarshini is the teacher of the dance group. Thank you. Anjana.
Next up, we have Anjana Yoganathan.
Anjana, congratulations. Thank you very much for your participation. Vipina.
The next recipient of the certificates is Vipina Navanathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wait. Okay, great. Thank you. Sayana.
Next recipient, we have Sayana Mageswaran.
Thank you very much for your participation.
And our last recipient is Soumya Parthipan.
Thank you. Molji, can you check? We're missing one.
Oh, that's it.
Okay, we will.
That's it, Roy.
Print another one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Now joining us from New York, the United States of America, the Right Honorable Mr. Vishwanathan Rudrakumaran, the Prime Minister of the Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam.
We have gathered here today to observe the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of Genocide. We have gathered here today to pay homage of the victims of the genocide. We have gathered here today to bear witness of mass atrocity that has happened, still happening across the globe. We have gathered here today to ensure never again.
Recording in progress.
Lenkin described this crime as the crime against the humanity itself. UN General Assembly Resolution 96-1 states that genocide is the denial of the right to existence of the entire group. The International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda characterized the genocide as a crime of all crimes. The International Criminal Tribunal of former Yugoslavia had designated the genocide as the crime on the top of the pyramid of crimes. In other words, genocide is mother of all crimes. In 1948, on the heels of the Holocaust, the United Nations enacted a convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime against genocide. Article 1 of the convention imposed the legal obligations on the parties to the covenant on the convention to prevent and punish crimes against the crime of genocide. Article 2 of the convention characterized the genocidal acts. A, it says killing members of the group. B, it says causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group. 3, it says deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. E, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. And E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. On behalf of the Tamil nation, I would like to use the Tamil genocide as a case study in addressing the impunity of the crime of genocide, and also about the preventive measures for future genocide. In 2009, according to the expert panel, according to the report of the expert panel appointed by the UN Secretary General, there are nearly 40,000 people were perished during the final stages of the war. According to the UN internal review report, nearly 70,000 people are unaccounted for. According to the late Bishop Father Rayapur, nearly 146,679 people remain unaccounted based on the data provided by the Sri Lankan government itself. The expert panel report, they made a finding stating that there are 5 grave violations. They identified the first one as killing civilians through widespread shelling. Second, they identified shelling hospitals and humanitarian objects. The third, denial of humanitarian assistance. Fourth, human rights violations suffered by victims and survivors of the conflict, including both IDPs and suspected LTT cadres. Number 5, human rights violations outside the conflict zone, including against the media and other critics of the government. In the findings of the expert panel report, item number 1, 2, and 3 correspond to subsection A, B, C of the Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. In spite of this, neither the 2 UN reports nor the OASL report mention the word genocide. They might say, well, there are genocidal acts, but it is difficult to establish the mental state of the perpetrators. They might say, well, there are genocidal acts, but it is difficult to establish the specific intent necessary to establish the crime of genocide. The intent, of course, we are not expecting the UN report to say that the act of genocide was committed. What we were expecting is the UN is saying there are credible evidence that the crime of genocide was committed. Intent is not unique to genocide. In any criminal proceedings, we prove intent through circumstantial evidence. And everybody knows during the final stages of the war, many countries, monitored what was happening via satellite. So from those pictures, from those intercepted messages, surely that we can discern, we can identify, or we can find definitely communications among the members of the Sri Lankan armed group about the planning, about the execution of genocide. We can monitor those things and we can get direct evidence. argument for sake, we said there is no direct evidence. Of course, then we can find any intent through circumstantial evidence. The circumstantial evidence, such as the historical political context, the scope of the attack, the scale of the attack, the repeated discriminatory acts, we can find the intent that is necessary to establish the crime of genocide through circumstantial evidence. But in spite of that, the UN was silent. The reason the UN was silent and is silent, because if they accept the crime of genocide was committed, then it imposed a legal obligation on the part of the state and the UN to act on it. Even the governments, they are reluctant to use the word genocide. During the first Bush administration, when the Bosnian Serbs massacred the Bosnian Muslims, Bush did not want to characterize it as an act of genocide. During the Rwanda genocide, the Clinton administration engaged in a mind-boggling semantic exercise. His press secretary said that hundreds of thousands of people are being butchered and acts of genocide may have taken place. Then one reporter asked, how many acts of genocide constitute a crime of genocide? When we come to Bush Jr., during the Darfur genocide, he was initially reluctant to use the term genocide. Then after the cry from the civil society and the media, then only reluctantly Bush used the word genocide. New York Times wrote a very powerful editorial. The New York Times said there is no word other than genocide can capture the magnitude of the crime, can capture the gravity of the crime. After that, only Bush administration, the Bush Jr. used the word genocide when it came to Darfur genocide. But along this line, I stand obliged to congratulate Canada. Canada was the first country that designate what was happening in Rohingya as an act of genocide. Canada was the first country. I must also congratulate Canada for passing the unanimous resolution in 2019 calling for an international investigation of crime of genocide in Sri Lanka. But I must also say the last 2 years that resolution remains as an empty expression. I hope the Canadian authorities will act upon it. Not only about, and if you trivialize them, if the countries are reluctant to call what happened on the ground as an act of genocide, it will be seen they are trivializing the crime and insulting the victims. So we call upon the governments to, if the crime of genocide is committed, please call it as a crime of genocide. With respect, all this shows that when you characterize an incident as a crime of genocide or not, political consideration plays an important role rather than the legal requirement. Take the accountability process. In the accountability process, also political consideration plays an important role. You take instance what happened in the Human Rights Council pertains to Sri Lanka. The High Commissioner for Human Rights called for a hybrid tribunal initially. Then in the last year, the High Commissioner called for the referral of Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court. In spite of that, the countries that sponsor these resolutions, they simply give the accountability to the Sri Lankan state itself, which stands accused for the crime, for these all the heinous crimes. Asking the accused to be a judge, that insults the common sense. The reason they are doing it, because of political considerations. So we have to understand this thing. But the fact that the states act based on political consideration doesn't mean that we should wash our hands with the states. We have to pressure the states. Given the prominence and importance of the civil society today, by mobilizing the civil society through the pressure of the international civil society, we can make states to act. And presently, an influential civil society group is making preparations to launch a campaign with respect to Sri Lanka, to launch a campaign to bring a legal action against Sri Lanka in the International Court of Justice. And I will talk about these things in the coming days with the other organizations about this initiative. Then since most of the countries, most of the judicial tribunals and judicial mechanisms are controlled by states. We victims, we should create our own forums. Along this line, the TGT has launched a campaign for victims-driven international justice. We are in the process of obtaining evidence from the High Commission of Human Rights based on the right to know, based on the right to truth. They have to share the evidence with the victims. According to Professor Blue, the was a former chief prosecutor against Milosevic, there are 120 countries where individuals can bring criminal action, private citizens can bring civil action. Civil action, criminal action. The other important thing, the crimes of genocide is not committed by one single individual, is not committed by one single army battalion. The crime was committed by the state itself. According to the OSL report, they characterize it as a systemic crimes. So we have to go after the states. But unfortunately, presently in the existing system, the states hide behind the veil of sovereign immunity and escape accountability. So that's, I think, we should bring amendments to the immunity laws. In Canada, US, and other countries, we have to bring amendments to immunity laws to the effect that the state cannot invoke sovereign immunity as a defense with respect to with respect to genocide. So today we are all here. We form an alliance and we embark on this mission. And as we speak today, what's happening in the island of Sri Lanka? The government of Sri Lanka is engaging in structural genocide by destroying the cultural property, by engaging in land grab in the Tamil occupied land. The Sri Lankan government is engaging in cultural genocide. However, as we know, as Lemkin said, and as international tribunals said, the cultural genocide will not fall within the purview of genocide definition. However, the cultural genocide can be used as an evidence that the perpetrator is intent to destroy the nation whole or in part physically. So we can take those things, those facts, and use it as an evidence. And based on international law and moral principles, when a group of people is subject to genocide, they are entitled to remedial justice. The African People's Tribunals have held in the litigation pertains to Cameroon, and it's another country, I forgot the name, that the African People's Tribunal have said that based on remedial justice, they can establish an independent state. With respect to Kosovo, the International Court of Justice was silent because that question was not put forward to the International Court of Justice. With respect to the Kosovo matter, 40 countries, they filed briefs as amicus curiae. So, and out of the 40 countries, 12 countries, including Germany and Russia, explicitly stated that when a group is subject to genocide, they have a right to a remedial justice, which can be exercised in the form of an independent state. Not only based on remedial justice, based on our inherent right to self-determination. We should exercise our self-determination as a resistant measure to prevent future any potential genocide. We have to exercise the right to self-determination externally to prevent any potential genocide. We have to exercise the right to self-determination in the form of an independent and sovereign state to ensure that we can live physically, our physical survival is guaranteed. As the Canadian Supreme Court said, the remedial justice and the right to external self-determination are intertwined. They are both two sides of the same coin. So we have to exercise both to ensure our physical survival. On this important day, we rededicate ourselves to seeking justice for the victims of genocide and to ensure there's never again. Thank you.
Thank you to the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Ruthrakumaran, for your inspirational speech tonight. And we applaud your continued efforts in your human rights and seeking justice for the genocide that you do. Thank you. Up next, we have Theophile Rigembe, the chairperson from the Rwandan community abroad, Toronto, to speak next at tonight's event. We welcome Theo.
Thank you. Honorable Aris Babikian, Honorable MPP present, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here tonight to represent Rwandan community abroad Toronto as the chairperson. Today, it's International Day of Commemoration Genocide and Victim and Other Crimes. To celebrate this day, it's very important, as the previous speakers said, it's very important because it's the time to talk about prevent genocide. It's also to take a time to think about education, to educate people, to make sure this situation, this genocide will not happen again. So what about Rwanda? So Rwanda, let's learn from the past. So what happened in the past, it's dehumanization of the Tutsi. So, and when they dehumanization the Tutsi, they will be able to kill them since 1959 up to 1994. At that time, the genocide against the Tutsi happened. But allow me to clarify one point. Many previous speakers said, in Rwanda, we never said about Rwandan genocide. So the United Nations recognized that as 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. That's how they call the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. We never call Rwandan genocide. When you say Rwandan genocide, it's kind of support of the situation we are facing now for those who perpetrate genocide and their relatives who try to deny the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda and who try to revisionize the genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda. So please, if you see or you heard somebody say Rwandan genocide, just make sure you clarify it's Rwandan 94, Rwandan, in Rwanda, genocide against the Tutsi. So let's say safeguard the future. So the situation you are looking, what happened in 1959 up to 1994, the parents who perpetrated the genocide were educated as a kid the same way they learned to dehumanize the Tutsi. And now the situation we are facing, the deniers and the revisionists are the youth from those parents. So which means the same way the genocide happened in Rwanda, it looks like the youth who are outside the country are learning in the same way and try to deny and to review the genocide, saying that it didn't happen in Rwanda, it was a civil war, or it didn't happen like we know that genocide against Tutsi happened in Rwanda. So that's why I'm urging you, everybody here, we need your support to fight against those deniers, those revisionists. And at the same time, we as Rwandan community abroad, Toronto, support the MPP Aris, what he is doing at Queen's Park to see how they can pass the bill which recognizes the genocide happened in different countries in this world. So please, Honorable Harris, whenever you need Rwandan community to support that the bill, wherever, the way you like, we are ready to come to support you and help that bill to pass and be recognized those genocide happened around the world. So, in the future, today you can see I am with Rita Ngarambe. She is a youth in our community. Now our youth is engaged in hope. So they see, we learn from our past to see how our future can be a hope to prevent genocide and to work hard and to be able to help this society to be better than it hasn't. That's what we are doing with our youth, and to see how this will happen. And the way we are doing that, we have to remember, that's the reason you have this day, doing that in unite and we renew. So also we are talking about education. We try to educate our youth the way to be patriotism, to have patriotism, and to work hard to build the country, and what happened will be the history, and we have to show a different face of our country, Rwanda. And the education in Rwanda, and we need your support out of the country. In Canada, here we are, and I know the MPP Aris talked about that already with the Minister of Education, how the genocide can be included in the curriculum. And the kids from elementary school to high school, they can learn about genocide, and from there they will help us, they will assist us to prevent the genocide in the future. I know Mr. T. Wang, for president of CPAC, talk about education as well. So it's a good way to see how our people, our kids, can participate in preventing the genocide, and the way it's education, they learn what happened, why happened, and how they can prevent. So again, Honorable Aris, we are behind you to talk to Minister of Education, to assist you and to see how they can include the genocide in the curriculum in Ontario. And to end my speech, thank you very much for inviting the Rwandan community, and thank you very much for all of you who participate in its organization. We always with you in preventing genocide wherever happen in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member Theophile Rigambe, Chairperson of the Rwandan Community Abroad Toronto Centre, for your astounding speech today and for educating us on the 1994 Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi people, and for your continued advocacy for the justice against genocide perpetrators. Up next, we have Mr. Habi Ellis from the Kurdish community to speak at today's event. Welcoming Mr. Habi.
Excuse for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Aris Babikian, Honorable Winston Key, Honorable representatives of the other communities. I would like to talk on behalf of the Canadian Kurdish diaspora in Canada, not representing any organization. The genocide has two different aspects that many people maybe miss. The survivors of the genocide and the witness to the genocide. Those two together gives us the reason why we have to fight. Not only for today, what happened in the past, that's why we say never again to not to happen in the future. The role of the diasporas as a Kurd in the Canadian Kurdish community or Canadian Kurdish diaspora, we are the voice of the voiceless for the people at the back home under oppression, that they cannot say what we can say freely in another platform in Canada or United Nations or some other NGOs. We all talk certain cases, how it happened, but actually we don't question why it happened. If we eliminate the reason why genocide happens, we will repeat them to happen in the future. When the Nazis were committing the Holocaust against the Jews, there was a Catholic priest named Frank Müller. I don't know if you heard this poem. He said, first they came. First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out for them because I was not a socialist. Then they came out for trade unionists, and I did not speak out for them because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came out for the Jews. I did not speak out for the Jews because I was not a Jew. Then they come for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. This is the message, how to prevent the genocide. If you walk alone, if you fight alone, no. It's a collective struggle. I fight for the Armenians, Armenians fight for the Greeks, Greeks fight for the Rwandans, Rwandans fight for the Tamils, and Tamils come back to the next one. Because we know somewhere else today in the world, something is happening. It's age of internet, we find out right away, but that's half of the story. After you find out what to do. We can go to Canadian government, we ask Canadians. But what Canadian government can do alone if the Americans are not supporting, British not supporting, German not supporting, or many other countries, African Union, Latin American Union, right? We talk about collective acting, all these governments for certain benefits. And NATO, 32 members, is a big force. But how many members of NATO really stopping some of those NATO members doing it, like Turkey? There are Kurds in Turkey, and NATO calling Kurds terrorists because they are fighting against oppression, which end up with the genocide. Turkey made a law that if you speak Kurdish, you will be penalized. In 1921, they say, let's say for today's value, for every word you will pay $1 if you speak Kurdish. So they arrest a guy, take to the court. And they brought a translator because he was not supposed to speak the language. So translator translated to the guy and translated to the judge. When the person realized why he was arrested, he said, $2 more, Your Honor, I will pay all the penalties. And the judge said, what is that 2 word? He said, F you. And I'm going to pay $2 more to say this. And then they confiscate Kurdish books, they confiscate Kurdish music, they confiscate Kurdish anything. They start demolishing the architectural buildings, cultural destruction. They start building water dams on the Kurdish villages, historical sites. And they try to eliminate all the civilizational proofs that Kurds existed on the land. But the land is also witness what happened. You dig one ground, you see what was there. You dig 2 feet, you will go 1,000 years back. You dig 8 feet, then it's your own graveyard. You will be punished for genocidal crimes and you will bury it there. I tell those governments, do not dig the land unless you know what you are looking. And the genocide with earth, with the stone, with the water, with the plants, with the animals over there, it proves what happened. They changed name of the flowers. They changed name of the animals. They changed name of the rivers. They hoped that they will succeed. But what we say, when the night falls over, sun rise up again. And we know the strength of you with the sun, with the light, there will never be a darkness enough that will bury this voice. We shall overcome. The victory is ours because we are united, we are together. We are here tonight representing the humanity, not the United Nations, us, with all of you. Thank you very much. I will cut it short. Thank you again for Mr. Aris Babikian, a longtime friend, Mr. Vincent Key, and many of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Habi Ellis from the Kurdish community, for your inspiring speech and educating us on the Kurdish genocide that happened in Kurdistan. We will now have our closing remarks, and so we call upon the Honorable Minister, Mr. Roy Vignarajah, the Minister for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities for the Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam, whom along with MPP Mr. Aris Barbican organized and coordinated today's event to give a vote of thanks and conclude today's commemoration on the International Day of the Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and the Prevention of the Crime.
Good evening, everyone. It's my honor to address you all this evening. First of all, I wish to express my sincere apology to all of you that are present right at this moment and who were present earlier. And I also wish to thank and congratulate my good friend, Honorable Aris Babikian, for helping me put this event together. When I approached him 3 weeks ago, he said, "Roy, let's do it." But he was so polite enough not to tell me that he was so busy at the legislature. He just wanted to accommodate me. He took me in, he said, "Roy, do not worry, I'll take care of everything." So we were working on the logistics only after 5 p.m. in the nights, and we tried to put this together. When we came here, it was a big disappointment, but still we made it. We have heard of groups such as Doctors Without Borders, Reporters Without Borders. And what I see here today, if I may have your permission, I would like to call us the GVWBs, Genocide Victims Without Borders. We are all Canadians, but we all have the scars of genocide that either us personally or our forefathers or our grandparents or parents that endured genocide. And all of you were able to watch our Prime Minister speak on Zoom. It was so unfortunate we couldn't get him on that screen. None of the audio visuals were working, but we somehow made it. And I have been appointed as the Minister for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities of the Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam, which is considered by many governments as a government in exile. We advocate for the emancipation of the Tamil people, and also we voice against all kinds of genocide perpetrated on humanity and on every victim group that has endured this genocide. So we are gathered here. In fact, my idea when I approached Honorable Babikian to organize this event was to form an alliance or a coalition with groups such as us to join hands and work together hand in hand to bring those people who are roaming scot-free with impunity after committing genocide to justice, and also to make sure that there's no further genocide is committed in no part of the world, so that we all, as children, brothers and sisters of the human family, live a peaceful world to our future generations. Living a peaceful world does not end our mission. We have to teach them, educate them of what took place in the past, where the humankind failed, and why the humankind failed, and why we had to kill each other, and some of us, groups like us, have to endure genocide. It is pure politics, geopolitics, and politics that plays a big role. I'm from Sri Lanka, the island of Sri Lanka, but the island of Sri Lanka, though it is called Sri Lanka now, for centuries, there were three distinct nations. When the Europeans arrived in Sri Lanka in 1505, there were three distinct nations, one Tamil and two Sinhalese. We had our own laws, own customs, own territories, our own language and everything else. But when the Portuguese were the first to arrive, when they arrived in 1505, they came as traders. They just wanted to, trade, but eventually they started taking the coastal areas over. Then from the Portuguese, to get rid of the Portuguese, the Sri Lankan Sinhalese kings, they approached the Dutch. But the Tamil kingdom, part of it fell to the Portuguese in 1619, and the southern part of it was resisting till 1803. Within this period, from the Portuguese, it went to the Dutch, and from the Dutch to the British. And it is the British that messed it up left, right, and center. Till the British took over from the Dutch, that island was still ruled separately. The two Sinhalese kingdoms separately and the Tamil kingdom separately. Now, if you ask any diplomat out there, they will say these Tamil people are just fighting for nothing. No. We are people with an inherent right to self-determination who enjoyed our sovereignty for centuries. And we are trying to reclaim and reinstitute our sovereignty now. Our country was called Jaffna Patnam or Yalpana Nadu, and today it has been renamed Tamil Eelam, which consists of the north and the east of Sri Lanka. But because the British in 1833, under the recommendations of the Colebrook Cameron Commission, for administrative convenience, they amalgamated the three kingdoms, made it one unit, left us as one unit in 1948, and we were reduced by numbers, numerical numbers. As a result, the present democratic system calls the higher number the majority. But we are not a minority. We are a nation of people. We are people from the nation of Tamil Eelam. And all of you may remember, back in 2009, it is a shame on the civilized world to get together. 23 countries got together in support of Sri Lanka to exterminate the Tamil race from that soil, from our own soil. We fought a big battle. We were called terrorists. Even now some of these politicians, they want to call us terrorists. We are not terrorists. The modus operandi needed in 1979 or 75, when the Tamil youth took arms, that was the modus operandi all over the world. There was the Contras that were fighting. There were the Mujahideens that were fighting. And that's the time the Vietnam War ended. All these people, they resorted to arms to get their oppressors out of their soil. So at that time, when the Tamils wanted, after trying every democratic and non-violent path, when they were all massacred, the Tamil youth had to think of a way, and that time the modus operandi all over the world was an armed struggle. So they resorted to arms. Because of that, now we are termed as terrorists. No, we are not. We had a big army, close to 80,000, 65,000 of them perished in 2009. After 2009, if we were terrorists, we could have still resorted to arms in a different way. We have a 1 million strong diaspora in the world. We have 350 to 400,000 strong in Canada. We have all the facilities here. Arms and ammunition are freely available in the black market. We could have resorted to arms if we wanted, if we were terrorists. We are not terrorists. We are intellectuals, we are academics, we are peaceful people. That is why we are begging Canada, we are begging the US, we are begging the UK, and we are going after every single country, asking them for help to recognize the Tamil genocide. And I really appreciate Honorable Babikian in his crusade to get genocide recognized for the various communities that have endured genocide. And I would like to thank him for putting this together, and I assure him that the transnational government of Tamil Eelam and also the Tamils will not only work with him, they will join hands with the Rwandans, the Kurdish, the Greeks, the Hellenics, the CPAC, the Rohingyas, and every single community that is facing massacre or inhumane treatment or genocide by itself. And without taking much of your time, before I conclude, I want to thank every single media personnel that was present here, and a special thanks to Mr. Krishna Lingam of Krishna Live. We were a small group here this evening, but there are more than 1,000 people watching us through these cameras, and it is going live. It is on Facebook. And any one of you want to watch this again, you can go to Krishna Live on Facebook and you will be able to see that. With all the difficulties we had with the AV system here, he made it happen for us. He made the world witness what we are doing. He made the world hear what we are doing. With him, there were the Tamil medias like Samugam Media, there was ABC Tamiloli, and there were some Tamil activist groups, And I also wish to, as our Prime Minister mentioned during his speech, there are some active groups that are pursuing Sri Lanka at the International Criminal Court. And there's this gentleman, Mr. Das, from the TRG, an ex-TGT MP. His group is one of those groups that are pursuing against the perpetrators of genocide in Sri Lanka at the ICC. And I'd like to thank my very good friend, Muralidharan, for his photographs. The Scarborough Mirror, Mike Adler personally sent me an email that he is unable to make it because his son was ill, but he would send his photographer. As he said, his photographer was here. And I also like to thank the Tamil Journal and Dr. Key, who is there. So let's all make a resolution today. Let us all resolve to work together, join hands together, and take this crusade forward. And at this very moment, I make a public call to all of you. The government of Canada, the federal government of Canada, has declared the month of April as the month of genocide condemnation month. So let us all jointly and collectively organize a grand and a big event this coming April in 2022. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to Mr. Babikian and or to me. I have given out my cards to most of you. And let's all work together. And I know it's election time for Honorable Babikian in April, but let's all work together. And even if he takes steps aside a little, let us all collectively and call him as a guest. He will come here to do an election speech amidst his election business, and we'll convene another big conference in April. This is my public call to all of you and my request to all of you. Thank you very much, and if I have missed to thank anyone here, I'm sorry, I don't remember the lady's name, Mr. Babikian's assistant. She's been very helpful. His two staff members, Betty, and there was another lady, I forgot her name. I've spoken to them with regard to this event. So my sincere thanks goes out to them on behalf of the transnational government of the Tamil Eelam and the Tamil people. And once again, I call upon all of you to join hands with the transnational government of Tamil Eelam, form an alliance. Let us make one website incorporating all our grievances. Instead of having 5 different websites, we have ours, you have, the Armenians have theirs, the Hellenics have theirs. Let's, for the purpose of crusading against genocide, we'll have one website incorporating all of us, then the message will go out to the world in the proper way. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here and making this event a success virtually through Krishna Live. And let's all meet once again in April, but let's start working and planning towards that event right after the new year. Thank you very much. Thank you all, and have a good night.